In a world where power often silences truth, one woman chose evidence over fear. She endured racism, corruption, and humiliation in silence, not out of weakness, but out of strategy. What no one knew was that the quiet waitress they mocked was building a case that would shake the entire city of Chicago. This is the story of Natasha Williams, the woman who turned every insult into proof and every injustice into power. The dinner service at Elegance shimmered with the illusion of perfection. Chandeliers spilled golden light across glassware so clean it almost glowed, and waiters glided across marble floors like performers on a silent stage. Among them moved Natasha Williams, quiet, composed, and focused. For 2 years, she had served this world of wealth with grace, her smile steady even when her heart ached. Every mistake the manager accused her of, every whispered slur that slipped past his polished grin, she endured it all, not because she was weak, but because she was patient. Natasha had learned that sometimes the most dangerous kind of strength is silence. Kevin Torres, the manager of Elegance, was the kind of man who mistook arrogance for power. His tailored suits couldn't hide his corruption. His words, soaked in charm, often dripped venom when no one else was listening. To the guests, he was professional. To Natasha, he was a daily battle. He'd brush too close when she reached for plates, mispronounce her name deliberately, and make jokes that stung but never crossed the line enough for anyone to call him out. Natasha didn't respond. She simply noted every detail: the time, the date, the witnesses. Her phone, tucked neatly in her apron, was her silent witness. It was late one Friday night when the restaurant hosted a private dinner for Senator Richard Richardson, one of Chicago's most powerful political figures. The event was lavish. Champagne flowed endlessly, and expensive laughter filled the room. Natasha moved from table to table, her steps light, her mind alert. She noticed Kevin slipping envelopes to the senator's assistant, whispering numbers under his breath. When the senator called Natasha over, his tone was too friendly, his smile too polished. He leaned close and said, "You didn't see anything tonight, did you?" The faint scent of bourbon lingered on his breath. He slipped an envelope into her hand. $5,000. For your silence. Natasha looked at the envelope, then at him. For a moment, she thought of her bills, her rent, her student loans. 5,000 could help, but her eyes hardened. "I serve food, Senator," she said softly. "Not corruption." She placed the envelope back on the table. The room seemed to still for a second. Richardson chuckled awkwardly, but Kevin's jaw clenched. Natasha walked away, heart pounding, but her voice steady. The night ended, guests left, and silence returned to the grand restaurant. Kevin waited until the last employee clocked out before calling her into the hallway behind the kitchen. The fluorescent light flickered above, casting harsh shadows across his face. His smile was gone. "Do you think you're better than me?" he hissed. "You embarrassed a U.S. Senator tonight. You think anyone's going to believe you over him? Over me?" His words cut deep, layered with bitterness and something darker. Natasha didn't flinch. Her phone, once again, was recording from her apron pocket. Kevin stepped closer, the air between them thick with hostility. "You people never learn, do you?" He sneered, his voice dropping into a cruel whisper. "You should have taken the money. You could have kept your job. But now—" He slammed his hand against the wall beside her. "Now I'll make sure no one in this city ever hires you again." Natasha stood frozen, not with fear, but with control. Every insult, every threat, she let it unfold. His words would be his undoing. He didn't know it yet, but he was building his own cage, word by word. When Kevin realized she wasn't reacting, his rage grew. "What, nothing to say? Maybe your husband can get you a job washing dishes somewhere?" He spat. "Oh, wait, I forgot. Doesn't he fix cars for a living?" "Figures." The hallway air shifted suddenly. A deep voice echoed from the shadows behind them. "Say that again." Kevin turned. A tall man stepped forward, his presence quiet but commanding. His dark coat framed him like armor, and his calm eyes cut sharper than any blade. Alessandro Moretti, Natasha's husband. His name was known only in whispers around Chicago, a man connected to people with influence that stretched far beyond city lines. Kevin's face went pale. Who are you? Alessandro didn't answer immediately. He looked at Natasha first, his expression softening for a brief second, then hardened again as his gaze returned to Kevin. I heard enough, he said, his voice calm, measured, but filled with the weight of control. You've said more in 5 minutes than most criminals confess in a lifetime. Kevin tried to stammer an excuse. It was just a misunderstanding. Stop, Alessandro interrupted quietly. The single word carried more authority than Kevin had ever felt in his life. He stepped closer, the dim light glinting off his cufflinks. You've had your fun humiliating people who can't fight back. But tonight, he paused, glancing at Natasha's apron, you picked the wrong one. Kevin looked at Natasha, finally realizing the phone's faint red recording light. His eyes widened in horror. Natasha spoke for the first time in minutes. Her voice was calm, steady, and filled with quiet power. You're right, Kevin. I didn't say anything. But I've been listening. For 2 years, silence fell. Kevin's breathing grew shallow. The faint hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. In that moment, the power dynamic shifted completely. The predator realized he was prey. The man who believed his position made him untouchable now stood trembling before the very woman he underestimated. Alessandro reached for Natasha's hand, guiding her gently past Kevin. It's time, he said quietly. You've got enough, Natasha nodded. Her patience had ended. Justice, calm, precise, and unstoppable, had just begun. Kevin stood frozen in the narrow hallway, his confidence draining from his face as Alessandro's presence filled the air like a storm waiting to break. For a man used to commanding others with insults and threats, Kevin suddenly looked small, cornered by something he couldn't manipulate or talk his way out of. He opened his mouth, his voice trembling as he tried to regain control. Listen, this is all a misunderstanding, he stammered. I was just frustrated, that's all. I didn't mean any of what I said. Things got out of hand. Alessandro tilted his head slightly, his eyes never leaving Kevin's. His voice was calm but carried an unmistakable edge. A misunderstanding? He repeated, every syllable deliberate. You call months of abuse and corruption a misunderstanding? His words cut with precision, as though each one was meant to strip Kevin's excuses bare. Kevin took a shaky step back, glancing toward the door as if he might still escape this moment. I've always respected Natasha, he lied weakly. If she felt disrespected, I apologize. I can make it right. We don't have to involve anyone else. Natasha finally stepped forward, her posture straight, her voice calm but resonant with years of suppressed truth. Involve anyone else? She repeated softly. Kevin, you already did. The moment you chose greed over integrity, the moment you turned this place into your personal empire of lies, it stopped being about me. It became something much bigger. Kevin blinked, confused. Natasha reached into her apron pocket and pulled out her phone. She unlocked it with a quiet tap, then turned the screen toward him. Do you see this? She asked. This folder is titled Elegance 6 Months. Inside are 43 recorded incidents. Every insult, every threat, every time you took money under the table or falsified receipts for your political friends. 27 photos of your meetings in private dining rooms. 62 detailed reports I've filed, time-stamped and verified. Kevin's face went white. He opened his mouth but no sound came out. His mind raced through every interaction, every moment he thought he had gotten away with it. You've been recording me? He whispered, horror creeping into his tone. Natasha nodded. For 6 months, she said. Every single day, every word. While you thought you were humiliating a waitress, I was building a case. The silence that followed was heavier than any shout. Alessandro stood still, his expression unreadable, but the faint trace of pride in his eyes didn't go unnoticed. Kevin's knees nearly buckled. Why? He managed to say. Why would you do this? Natasha looked at him steadily. Because you're not just a bully, Kevin. You're part of something rotten. I've seen the envelopes, the bribes, the favors you promised politicians and businessmen in exchange for silence. I've seen the books you altered to move dirty money through this restaurant. Kevin's jaw dropped. He shook his head violently. You don't know what you're talking about. Those were harmless transactions, business arrangements, Natasha interrupted, her voice unwavering. You moved over $2 million through fake catering receipts last year alone. And you did it for men who think they're untouchable. But you made one mistake. You used the same staff system for your fake transactions. Every number, every transfer went through my hands. You should have realized by now that I wasn't here just to serve food. Kevin stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. The image of a simple waitress shattered before his eyes. Who are you? He asked weakly. Natasha took a step closer, her tone soft but commanding. I have 2 degrees, economics and criminology. I speak 4 languages, and before I ever put on this apron, I worked with investigative analysts tracking white-collar crime. I came here under recommendation, not desperation. You thought I was beneath you, Kevin. I was studying you. The words hit him like a blow. He turned toward Alessandro, panic creeping into his expression. You set this up? This was all some kind of trap? Alessandro's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Let's just say the government needed eyes inside this place. Someone who could get close to the corruption without being noticed. His tone was measured, cold. Natasha was the best choice. Kevin stumbled back against the wall, his voice breaking. You can't just ruin me like this. I have friends in high places. The senator will protect me. Natasha shook her head slowly. The senator's already in custody, she said. His assistant was arrested an hour ago. The accounts you both used to launder money were flagged days ago. Everything is already in motion. Kevin's chest heaved as he tried to process it all. You're lying, he whispered, his voice cracking. Alessandro pulled a phone from his coat pocket, pressing a button on the screen. From the distance came the faint sound of sirens, sharp, rising, growing louder with every second. That, Alessandro said quietly, is the sound of the truth catching up. Kevin's legs gave out and he slumped to the floor, his face buried in his hands. Please, he muttered, trembling. Please, I can fix this. Natasha looked down at him, her expression neither cruel nor pitying, only resolute. You can't fix what was never broken, Kevin, she said softly. You broke yourself. The sirens outside grew louder until they filled the air like judgment itself. Blue and red lights flashed through the restaurant's front windows, casting streaks across the marble floor. Federal agents were already stepping out of their cars, the reflection of their badges glinting under the lights. Kevin looked up, eyes wide with disbelief as the reality of his downfall unfolded around him. The man who once used fear as his weapon was now paralyzed by it. And standing before him, calm and unshaken, was the woman he had dismissed, the one whose silence had been his undoing. In that moment, Kevin Torres understood what true power looked like. Not loud, not cruel, but steady and patient. And as the sirens wailed and the agents approached, he realized that his reign of intimidation was over. The hunter had become the hunted. The sound of heavy boots echoed through the polished halls of elegance as the front doors burst open. Federal agents in dark jackets fanned out with precision, their badges gleaming beneath the restaurant's golden chandeliers. The scene that had once been filled with laughter, expensive wine, and political chatter was now replaced with chaos and disbelief. Guests, still finishing their meals, froze mid-bite, watching as agents unfolded papers, reading Kevin Torres's rights. The empire he had built on lies was collapsing around him, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Kevin stood behind the bar, pale and trembling. The confident manager who once ruled every corner of this place with arrogance now looked like a man stripped of his own identity. This can't be happening, he whispered to himself, but his voice broke halfway. His eyes darted toward Natasha and Alessandro standing near the entrance, calm amid the storm. Natasha placed a sleek black briefcase on one of the tables. With a quiet click, she opened it. Inside were neatly arranged binders, hard drives, and stacks of documents, all color-coded and organized. Here it is, she said softly. 6 months of evidence, financial transfers, falsified receipts, and recordings that trace every illegal payment from this building to City Hall. Her tone wasn't cruel. It was clinical, professional, as if she were simply finishing a job. Kevin's gaze fell on the papers spilling across the table. Each page carried his signature, his handwriting, his crimes laid bare in black and white. Natasha flipped through the files, pulling out photos. Grainy images of him exchanging envelopes with Senator Richardson. Security camera stills of secret meetings with Judge Morrison. Text message screenshots arranging payoffs. Every secret he had buried was now visible under fluorescent light. Alessandro stood beside her, silent but commanding, his presence radiating the calm authority of someone who had seen this moment coming for a long time. He turned slightly as a new figure entered the room, a man in a sharp gray suit carrying a federal badge. "Kevin Torres," the newcomer announced. "I'm Michael Santos, Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Illinois. You're under investigation for racketeering, money laundering, bribery, and obstruction of justice." Kevin blinked, his confusion morphing into despair. "Michael?" he gasped. You were here last week for dinner. You said you were an investor." Michael's eyes narrowed, a hint of satisfaction behind his calm expression. "I was," he said simply. "An investor in the truth." It hit Kevin like a punch. He looked between Alessandro and Natasha, realization dawning too late. The waitress he'd mocked, the man he'd insulted, and the friendly diner who praised his wine list, they had all been working together. Orchestrating his downfall piece by piece, agents began collecting devices, hard drives, and ledgers. The restaurant was no longer a place of luxury. It had become a crime scene. Kevin's voice cracked as he tried to speak. "You can't arrest me without cause. I can help you. I have information, names, accounts, everything." Natasha looked at him quietly. "We already have everything," she said. "Every name, every account, every word. You were never as careful as you thought." He stepped closer to her, desperation replacing pride. "Please, Natasha," he begged. "I have children. They'll take everything from me. Just say something. Help me." His hands shook as he reached out, but she stepped back. Her eyes met his, calm and cold. "The investigation doesn't need your words anymore," she said softly. "It's already complete." She turned another page in the binder and laid a photo in front of him, a candid shot of himself leaning against a wall, laughing with the senator, a glass of whiskey in one hand and an envelope in the other. "You thought you were invisible in those moments," she continued, "but every move you made left a trail." Kevin's breath came in ragged gasps. He could hear the faint sound of agents in the distance calling out names. Senator Richardson, Judge Morrison, Congressman Walsh, all being taken into custody at the same time. His entire network of power was being dismantled in a single night. His phone, still buzzing on the counter, lit up with messages from colleagues and associates, all desperate, all terrified. The empire of influence he had built was eating itself alive. Alessandro stepped closer, his voice quiet but sharp. "You used fear as your weapon," he said. "You preyed on those who couldn't fight back. But you forgot something, Kevin. Intelligence is a weapon too. And tonight, it's aimed at you." Kevin's knees gave out. He dropped onto the cold marble floor, tears forming in his eyes. "Please," he whispered. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I just wanted to survive." Natasha looked down at him, her expression unreadable. "You thought I was invisible," she said quietly. "But invisibility can be a weapon." Two agents approached, securing Kevin's wrists in handcuffs. The metallic click echoed through the restaurant, final and cold. He didn't resist. His gaze lingered on Natasha, his face twisted with regret and disbelief. As he was led toward the door, flashes from outside lit up the walls, the blue and red rhythm of FBI vehicles waiting to take him away. Reporters were already gathering beyond the glass, their cameras reflecting the chaos inside. Kevin paused at the threshold, the scent of luxury still in the air, the sound of his own downfall ringing in his ears. Natasha closed her briefcase and stood silently beside Alessandro. The noise faded until only the hum of the city remained. Outside, the agents guided Kevin into the back of a waiting car, his head bowed. The doors shut with a dull thud, and the convoy pulled away into the night. Natasha watched the flashing lights disappear into the distance, her face calm but resolute. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of silence lift from her shoulders. Justice, not revenge, had spoken, and it had spoken through her. 6 months later, the air inside the Chicago Convention Hall shimmered with anticipation. Journalists filled the aisles, camera flashes reflected off the grand stage, and a low murmur of admiration rolled through the crowd. In the center of it all stood Natasha Williams, graceful and composed. The woman who had once been dismissed as a simple waitress now hailed as a national symbol of courage and intelligence. Her black dress glimmered under the spotlights as the host announced her name. The applause that followed wasn't polite. It was thunderous, alive, echoing through the hall like justice itself had found a voice. Natasha walked to the podium, the golden plaque of the National Anti-Corruption Award waiting before her. She paused for a moment, her eyes scanning the crowd, politicians, activists, journalists, and hundreds of women who had written letters thanking her for showing them that quiet does not mean powerless. When she began to speak, her voice was calm, steady, but filled with depth that only those who had walked through darkness could carry. 6 months ago, she began, I was invisible, not because I lacked worth, but because people chose not to see me. They mistook silence for submission and kindness for weakness. But invisibility, when used with purpose, can become a strategy, a mirror that reflects corruption until it destroys itself. I learned that sometimes the loudest revolution begins in quiet observation. Her words held the audience captive. Behind her, a large screen began to play short clips from her undercover recordings, blurred images of her collecting evidence, of meetings, of files being handed over to federal agents. The crowd watched in silence. Flashbacks flickered across her own mind. Kevin's smirk as he called her names, the weight of the phone in her pocket as she recorded each threat, the cold sting of humiliation she had carried for months. But those same moments that once burned with pain now shone like proof of transformation. As she continued her speech, the screen changed to show the aftermath. Kevin being escorted into custody, Senator Richardson behind bars, and the newspaper headlines that followed. Elegance scandal shakes Chicago's elite. But the final image drew the loudest applause, a headline reading, Natasha Williams leads federal task force against workplace discrimination. She smiled softly before continuing. We cannot erase the systems that hurt us overnight, she said, but we can expose them. And when we do, we must rebuild something better in their place. That is not revenge. That is justice. In the months following the arrests, Natasha had chosen not to return to anonymity. Instead, she used the platform she never asked for to change the world that once tried to silence her. She founded an organization called the Invisibility Project, a national network that trained women to recognize and report systemic abuse in corporate and government environments. She began mentoring survivors of workplace discrimination, teaching them the same patience and precision that had brought down her former boss. The city of Chicago, inspired by her story, passed a landmark reform law known as the Natasha Williams Act, requiring mandatory anti-discrimination audits for all businesses and government offices. For the first time in decades, companies faced accountability for the invisible wounds their cultures had inflicted. The city that once ignored her had turned her name into a standard of integrity. Meanwhile, the people who had once worked beside her also began to rise. Maria, the quiet kitchen worker who had watched Natasha endure humiliation in silence, was now head chef of a major downtown restaurant, leading a diverse team with respect and pride. Jessica, the sommelier who once feared speaking out, became the first black wine director in Chicago's fine dining scene. Both credited Natasha for changing not just their careers but their courage. And far away, in a gray cell surrounded by concrete walls, Kevin Torres sat alone. His name, once whispered with authority, had become a cautionary tale taught in business ethics classes. Universities studied his case under the title, Power, Prejudice, and the Cost of Arrogance. His wife had filed for divorce, his children refused his calls, and every friend who once benefited from his influence now pretended not to know him. On the wall of his cell he had taped an old newspaper clipping, Natasha's face on the front page, smiling as she held her award. It was the only thing he saw before lights out every night, a daily reminder of how completely he had been outplayed. Back in the present, Natasha finished her speech. "The best revenge," she said, her voice rising over the quiet, "is not destroying those who hurt you. It's building something so great that they spend the rest of their lives regretting they underestimated you." The audience rose to their feet, applause swelling into a wave that seemed to vibrate through the hall. Cameras flashed. Tears shone in the eyes of strangers who felt her triumph as their own. She stepped away from the podium and looked out at the crowd. Thousands of faces, all standing, all clapping for a woman who had once been unseen. As the applause faded into music, the lights dimmed. A short film played behind her, a montage of her new life, visiting classrooms, shaking hands with world leaders, and standing at the United Nations podium, her voice translated into dozens of languages. Her book, Strategic Invisibility, had become a global bestseller, inspiring movements in cities across the world. In the final scene, the camera pulled back slowly as she stood beneath a cascade of light, her hands folded, her expression calm and proud. The applause roared once more, and as the frame lingered on her silhouette, it became clear Natasha Williams was no longer invisible. She had turned her silence into a revolution, her suffering into strength, and her name into a symbol of justice that would echo far beyond Chicago's skyline. The screen faded to black, and with it the story of a woman who proved that quiet power can change the world.